Yes, in a big way. And I'm glad you brought that up, because there are places, well, what we see is on the internet, but there is this big idea of what you just spoke of, that people are going to be just lifted up out of the gloom here and taken up, and it's just going to be easy, and that has to be loved by the people that do not take responsibility and think, well, okay, I'm going to keep all my crud, but I'm going to be enlightened. How does that work? That doesn't work.
Right. It's kind of like, well, there's only one way to get that fish into the frying pan, and that's to scale it and clean it first. And that's not a pleasant process.
Yes.
But, if you want fish, that's how you got to do it. So,
that's a beautiful analogy. I love it.
Well, it's along the lines of, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, do the dishes, sweep the floors.
Yeah, it's just done with a deeper understanding and loftier attitude.
There you go.
But that I don't have any doubt that, of course, everything evolves or becomes from the teeniest. So it is from below to above. And there is, I think, quite a bit of evidence that there's going to be a struggle here on Earth, and there's going to be a battle above or around the Earth for dominion amongst different approaches.
There you go. A paradigm contention, if you will, rather than warfare per se. Although down here, I'm sure we'll have plenty of warfare as well. But I think you're quite correct. It's more the battle of context and understanding as opposed to actual physical dominion of stuff.
Well, thank you. You put it so much better.
Well, we actually see a lot of
words here.
I say we actually see a lot of this in the report or in the data, and so I'm just merely, to a certain extent, echoing back some of the language we've already encountered.
Uh-huh.
For instance, we have longer-term data that suggests around the alien wars of 2011 that war may not really be an appropriate term, but that we don't yet have one for that, and we really probably need to describe something of a very energetic battle of paradigms for dominance. But we have a lot of language that suggests that the contact component of that will be a catalyst, if you will, for the great masses of the planet of Earth that are not able to think hyperdimensionally or haven't shifted their thinking over that way and are caught up in, the daily struggle of surviving in a world that's ordered by the powers that be. This whole thing is going to shatter in probably over the course of July of 2010 to July of 2011, such that by summer of 2011 we're smack into the alien wars. And it may actually not be shooting battles, but rather the war for paradigms is maybe we're at the point where there's acknowledged aliens trucking about and they make no bones about it, that kind of thing, and they just come on down, I don't know, as tourists or whatever, but the language would suggest that we actually have those images floating around of where you might be given a video, of say a crowd scene in New York or whatever, and be able to spot non-human terrestrial or non-terrestrial humans or humanoids walking around in that crowd. And so that didn't seem particularly warlike, but nonetheless we have a lot of words around contention and contest in the sense of not competition, but rather struggle. And it could refer to, if we really want to get into the archetype, it could be that it's humanity that's struggling within itself to accept all of this, and it's not really a situation of, a fist to the jaw kind of a struggle, but more an internal beating of the ego kind of a struggle. Makes sense?
Yes.
Very cool. All right, with that, Cliff, we'll take another break. You're listening to Cliff on Beyond the Ordinary. We'll be back right after this.
Well, Cliff is speaking of temporal, and our time here really goes fast when you're on, Cliff, so...
Well, maybe it's because we're hyperchroniac, we're living in that faster acceleration of time. That's a key thing in our Space Code for Identity. I mean, it's just come out of nowhere, and it's just gotten so solid and it extends way into 2015 or beyond. So there are going to be people that will relate to this new energy in a way that is different, more harmonious than the rest of us, perhaps. And a lot of the language is all about time disappearing, so maybe so, yeah. But speaking of the temporal markers, we were talking earlier about all that stuff in September, the earthquake and then the terrorism, and we got both of those fairly accurately. And then we were off by a week, really, on the report of the storm. It's really hitting more now than on the 14th, although it started raining on the 14th. But anyway, those immediacy temporal markers that I was looking at back in August are part of a chain that lead us up to our October 25th and beyond. And October 25th for us is some form of it's a very key date, and I'm hesitant to say that there will be an actual event, but it may be a culmination of a whole series of events that lead up to that. But there's a very sharp turn in the language that occurs on that date. And one way we could liken it would be the sharp turn in language that occurred in, say, the Battle of Britain, when all of a sudden the British cities were being actively bombed by the Germans. Prior to that, there were all kinds of problems. The war was an issue, but there was their personal. The people of London, for instance, the battle of the air battle there, they were not at personal risk until the bombing campaign started, and from that point on, their lives were no longer the same. Now, we think that there's some similar sort of language in the sense of an emotional turn that will occur on the 25th of October, and it'll take us 10 days to digest. So we'll be in that sort of frame of mind for 10 days. Now, another way to look at it might be in a similar vein to the Cuban Missile Crisis, because that was a period of time where, I think for 6 days actually, everybody just sort of held their breath, and we're all in the same frame of mind waiting to see if in fact America and Russia would go to war, nuclear war likely, over Cuba. So we may be in a collective period of 10 and a half days where everybody's going to just kind of wonder how is it going to come out and so on. We think that the resolution on that, the point that it breaks, will be around November 4th or November 5th, and from then on we go into this jagged little period of time, and for a little bit, and then we have a context change coming up in December. All of this is supported, if you will, or propelled by the emotional angst and anxiety that's building around the U.S. dollar, and it'll hit the masses, I think, around October 25th, but I don't know that impact of the dollar's fragility and its pending death, I don't know if that's the emotional trigger for what we see from the 25th on. It unfortunately might be a situation of diverting the energy. Got this friend of mine, Bob Hitt, who runs astroecon.com. Now, Bob does forecasts for the market based on astrology stuff, and he noticed an effect that there was astro, for instance, that would say the market's supposed to go down on this particular day, and it doesn't go down on that day. But what he did notice was that there might be some kind of a major headline-grabbing shooting instance, for as an example. So you may have someone come and shoot up a campus. A lot of people die and this kind of thing, terror and so on. It lasts a day and it sort of fades out. And it was on the day that he had forecast for the markets to go down, and instead on that day the markets just sort of ambled along. And so he came up with this theory that they're actively diverting that energy and putting it over into these other more horrific ways in order to, if you will, divert that energy away from the market level of activity. And so we might be looking at something like that, where maybe if there were going to, let me put it this way, if there ever was a signature in our work that suggested that there was a possibility of a false flag diversionary kind of an attack or effort from the powers that be, I would have to peg it as occurring on October 25th, within a day either side perhaps, because of the sudden shift that we get into this building tension language.
Interesting. Now, what about there's also the plan of October 15th for the swine flu, the flying pigs, swine flu vaccinations to begin.
Well, they already actually have begun, and it's horrid, really. If you read in some of the language, the they've taken the First Nations people. The Canadian government shipped them up their Tamiflu, quote, vaccine kind of stuff, and they've already seen hundreds of individuals become sick, and the government is so confident of the outcome that they're mailing body bags up to them. So that part of the war against humanity has already come out. And the Canadians are no worse than the U.S. in terms of our history of using disease to conquer Aboriginal people, but it's rather a blatant kind of a thing to cause this to occur. So I would agree that there is going to be that, and we see the refusal